Hey guys, Eckhart's Ladder. Hello and welcome to another episode of Star Wars Galaxy Versus. This is a brand new series, and I'm not going to lie, I am not at all set on the name. But what we're going to be doing in this series is, instead of looking at individual starship matchups like we do in Starship Versus, we're going to be taking large-scale scenarios like a galactic invasion and trying to predict what would happen. If you like this new series, make sure to give this video a like, and if I see enough, I'll know to continue it. I've got some future ideas, including seeing which ships in the Star Wars universe could defeat the Forerunner ship, the Mantle's approach. But anyway, let's start with today's video, and we're looking at a very interesting topic in my mind. It's the invasion of Reach. This, of course, was one of the pivotal moments during the Human Covenant War and is captured by the game Halo Reach. We're once again looking at the Empire today, as we did with my previous two videos, and by the way, if you want to see them, I've put a link to a playlist down in the description and I'll also post it in the comments. But we're looking at whether the Empire could have invaded Reach, specifically whether the Empire's fleet at the Battle of Endor, excluding the Death Star, could have invaded the planet. We've got a few rules for this scenario. The first is that we're only looking at the actual defenders of Reach at the beginning of the battle, so we're not taking the backup fleets, we're only looking at the Epsilon Eridani fleet and any ground forces on the planet. The goal of the Empire here is to destroy all major population centers on the planet. The goal of the UNSC is to destroy all Imperial naval forces and any troops that have been deployed to the planet. If the Empire is successful, I'll decide whether the backup UNSC forces, which were en route to Reach during the battle, could have stopped the invasion. If the UNSC is successful, I'll look at whether the Empire could have sent a reactionary fleet to take the planet. So here's how I'm going to do the battle. I'm going to look at the forces involved in the fall of Reach, the actual battle itself, and then see how the Empire stands up. Now, there are going to be some discrepancies here because the Halo universe has kind of contradicted itself when it comes to the Battle of Reach a few times, but I will do my best to try to explain it in a way that you guys can understand. So let's talk about the actual battle itself within the Halo universe, and the first thing you should know is that this was one of the largest and most important battles during the Human Covenant War. At the time of Reach, actually, the Covenant invading fleet was the largest that had ever been seen. They had over 750 warships, including an almost 30-kilometer long CSO-class supercarrier. The Long Night of Solace, which was the name of the supercarrier, itself probably carried in tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of Covenant assets. When you add the 750 warships, including CAS-class carriers and other important Covenant ships, you've got tens of millions, likely, Covenant forces on the ground. Reach was one of the most important planets to the UNSC, and given that, it was very well defended. The Epsilon Eridani fleet, which protected Reach and the surrounding systems, was one of the largest stationed during the war. It had 150 ships in total, including the UNSC Trafalgar. An old Bungie site said that Reach had a total military manpower of 390 million. However, that's probably just calculating the total number of fighting-aged people on the planet. In addition though, the site does make it clear that the UNSC had over 100,000 air, land, and naval assets. Notably, over the planet, the UNSC had 20 orbital defense supermac platforms and an array of nuclear mines. Finally, the UNSC had, stationed on the planet, several teams of Spartan 2s and a team of Spartan 3s. So let's talk about how the battle went down, and really, this was not a great victory for either side. The UNSC lost, of course, one of its most important planets, and it was totally glassed by the Covenant. The Covenant, on the other hand, lost hundreds of ships, including their large supercarrier. The invasion was started by an advanced force comprising of a few Covenant corvettes and the large supercarrier. They used stealth, landed troops immediately, and achieved in-atmosphere air superiority. The UNSC actually won a few early battles. They were able to stop the Covenant's attack on Sword Base, and at the Battle of Vieri, they stopped the Covenant's clandestine landing of troops after destroying one of their towers. At this point, they discovered the large supercarrier, which retreated into space, apparently somewhere where it had disabled the supermac platforms. The UNSC would actually manage to destroy this supercarrier as well, and at this point the battle wasn't looking too bad. However, then arrived the Fleet of Particular Justice, a massive Covenant invasion force. The Fleet of Particular Justice engaged Reach's orbital defense platforms and the Epsilon Eridani defense force. Much of the Covenant fleet actually was wiped out by an array of nuclear mines placed around the planet and the opening salvo of UNSC forces and the orbital defense platforms. However, after surviving this initial attack, the Fleet of Particular Justice wiped out 80% of the UNSC forces around the planet. Specialized ships like the Covenant Super Battlecruiser then managed to take out many of the orbital defense platforms from a distance. The Covenant then landed assets to take out the orbital defense platform generators, which were on the planet themselves. At this point, much of Reach's defense platforms were lost, and the Covenant followed up with 2 more fleets, including the fleet of Holy Respite and the fleet of Righteous Vigilance. The UNSC, of course, would be routed on Reach. The planet was lost, all of the major cities and really all of the planet itself was completely glassed, and there were almost no survivors. So let's now talk about the Empire, and specifically their fleet that was active during the Battle of Endor. Endor was one of the largest engagements during the Galactic Civil War, although given that the war was fought mostly using hit and run tactics, that's not saying a whole lot. If you go by the Star Wars Legends numbers, which of course you guys know that I like to do, the Empire had a total of about 50 ships. The fleet was, of course, led by the Executor, a 19-kilometer long super star destroyer. In addition, there were also 2 larger battle cruisers, although we don't actually know very much about them. The main fleet was comprised of 33 Imperial 1 and Imperial 2 class star destroyers. Supplementing these forces were 3 Tector class star destroyers, a Victory class star destroyer, a Victory 2 class star destroyer, several immobilizer cruisers, and then several lighter frigates. This is quite an impressive force, and although realistically the Empire probably could have spared a lot more for this battle, this fleet was powerful enough to actually test the entirety of the Rebel Alliance. It's my theory, and if you want to learn more about this, you can watch my video called What Would Have Really Happened After Endor, which is kind of like my attempt at a Star Wars audiobook, that the Empire only moved so few ships because the Alliance would have noticed fleet movements had they actually brought in more Star Destroyers. You have to remember that the attack on the Death Star was supposed to be a trap by the Empire, and really the Star Destroyers were just there to make sure that the Rebel Alliance did not escape. This is important because it represents a difficulty that the Empire is going to have here. The Covenant invaded Reach with their largest force seen to date. The Empire's fleet in this instance, however, was most likely meant for secrecy. I think this brings us to the actual matchup. When you play the game Halo Reach, you don't necessarily realize how large of a conflict it was. However, when you do some digging and when you actually read into the forces used by the Covenant, you realize just how important and just how large of a battle that this was. I mean, the Covenant threw hundreds of ships at the orbital defense platforms and the other defenses at Reach, and most of them were destroyed. The Empire here has only 50 ships. Given that there are 20 orbital defense platforms, that means that there's 1 for every 2 Imperial ships. We also have 150 UNSC ships. Most of these would also have a MAC on them, so that means that we've got 3 MAC cannons for every single Imperial ship. I'm really not going to get into the power scale and how Star Wars has shields of whatever power because I don't think it's necessary here. We know that a MAC is an extremely powerful weapon, and unless we go with the kind of ridiculous Star Wars Legends numbers, which puts the shot of a single turbo laser in the 300 gigaton range, I think it's pretty clear that the Empire is going to lose this space battle, especially when we take the nuclear minefield into account. Even if some ships get through, or like some of the orbital defense platforms are pointing in the wrong direction, I still don't think the Empire will be able to successfully continue the invasion. A fleet of this size would have had probably at max 1,000 walkers, and when you're losing a bunch of ships, that number gets cut down pretty dramatically. The UNSC has extensive ground forces, including the use of Spartans. I really don't think the Empire will be able to dig in and actually win any battles on the ground. They'll have to rely on Star Destroyers in space, taking down the cities from above with base delta maneuvers. Even if we are assuming that the Empire does somehow manage to miraculously destroy all of the orbital defense platforms and the surrounding Reach fleet, each one of these Star Destroyers is still going to be a huge target. I'm fairly confident that the UNSC could, even without remaining orbital naval assets, manage to destroy them somehow. I mean, we saw in Halo Reach just how crafty the Spartan 3s and Spartan 2s can be. So yeah, I'm gonna give this battle to the UNSC. I mean, I could have looked more in depth at actually the power differences between the UNSC and the Empire, but given the disparity of resources in this case, I really just did not think it was necessary, and I thought the result here was pretty clear. So the Emperor notices that some pesky planet has destroyed an invading force. Can the Empire somehow muster the rest of its forces and take down Reach? I think the answer here is pretty clearly yes. I mean, the Empire had, for example, the Death Star 2. However, even without super weapons though, it's been said in Star Wars Legends that the Empire had trillions of individuals and millions of vessels. I think it's pretty likely that if the Empire really wanted to, they could ram Reach out of existence just by flying ships at it, but by conventional means, I mean, it's really no contest. So So that's my final finding. The Empire could not have successfully invaded Reach with their forces from Endor. However, the full Empire certainly could. But as I always say, that's just one man's opinion. I would love to hear what you guys think. Take a second right now and vote in the upper right hand corner. First, we're going to talk about, could the Empire have invaded Reach with their forces from the Battle of Endor? And on second thought, I'm actually not going to include the poll of could the Empire have defeated Reach with all of their resources, because I think that that's pretty clear. I really hope that you guys are enjoying this video and that you're enjoying more generally these new types of matchups. They take a bit more research on my end, but they are a lot of fun to do. If you have ideas for future ones, make sure to let me know down in the comments, and if you see any suggestions that you like, give them a thumbs up and a supporting comment. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, guys. As always, may the Force be with you.